I'm here today with Nathan, and we're going to talk a little bit about your story and some of the journey that God's had you on over the past year. But why don't you start by telling us a little bit about who you are, what are some of the things you enjoy doing in life?
As you said, I'm Nathan, 33 years old. In terms of what I enjoy in life, I enjoy walking my dog. As interesting he makes that. I quite enjoy spending time with family. Being married, I spend a lot of time with my wife, doing various things with her, various activities, and we just quite enjoy doing things together generally. My job at the moment is I'm a bike technician. I dabble in bikes at home and things like that as well. I do enjoy riding as well. Just enjoy most of the time just being out here with my wife and in the countryside and just doing stuff together.
That's great. So we're going to think a little bit about your story today. And so tell us a little bit about your childhood, growing up, and then coming to a realization that something wasn't right with your health. How did that come about as you grew up?
Yeah, so I was an early Christian, so probably about the age of 8 or 9, I remember asking my parents to pray the prayer with me. Just felt drawn to that. From that point, I would say everything kind of as you are as a child at that point, you don't necessarily you know what you've said and what it means, but you don't know what God's going to do next. Yeah. So for me, things changed when I was 13. So I'd spent a year at high school by then. And kind of it started off just as kind of a normal day where things kind of went a bit wrong at school. From then, I was off school for a couple of weeks, kind of unwell, and it just didn't get better. It continued from then. Plenty of doctor's visits over the course of a month or so. Being at that age, I wasn't necessarily aware of how bad it was. I think because it got worse quickly, I started to kind of get a sense from my parents that something was really wrong. So I was going to seeing the doctors a lot more, trying a lot more medications. Over the course of about 2 months, nothing got better. No medications were helping, and things were getting quite desperate, I would say. And looking back, there's a lot of stress I can see, which perhaps I didn't at the time, on my mum and dad and family life. But it all changed when we went to see a doctor at the Bury Hospital, West Suffolk Hospital. By that point, things were getting very bad. It was... I remember one thing my doctor said before he diagnosed me, and that's it. You have a couple of weeks, so we need to treat this now. The diagnosis I was given, which I was told at the time was very difficult to do with children, even at 13, which was Crohn's disease. The original diagnosis was actually Crohn's and colitis. But the official diagnosis was Crohn's disease in the end. At that point, I was admitted to hospital to get that confirmed very, very quickly, within a couple of days. After that was confirmed, I was put on medication and started the process of trying to get better. Yeah.
Wow. What do you remember of that time? Like, what was the impact it was having on your life? So you're in and out of doctors, but physically, what impact did it limit what you were able to do? Was it limiting what you were able to eat, or how you lived life, or?
Yeah, so as I said, being at that age, it's quite difficult to remember exactly perhaps how much I was taking in, how much I was aware of. All I knew is that was the symptoms, really. That's what I was trying to deal with and trying to explain that to my parents as best as I could. In terms of sharing how that felt to them, I would say that was quite difficult.
Yeah.
Because, again, at that age, for me, I didn't know how to describe it best to them. I could only describe it as how I knew it.
Yeah.
For them to understand that, I think, was quite difficult. They could see what I was going through. The main symptom really was malnutrition. I couldn't absorb anything effectively, which obviously that's kind of one of your main issues as looking after your body. Is you need to eat to maintain your health and for things to work properly.
Yeah.
So things were going downhill very fast. The medication being a child, I gave it in a form that was most acceptable for me, so it's easiest to take. And over the course, I'd say it took probably a month before I saw any kind of real improvement, I would say. It took probably well over a year to recover actually from that. And I remember there being a day where I woke up and I just had more energy, and just kind of things just kind of gradually improving from there. It's the main effect, though, I would say is it had was not actually on kind of, although immediately obviously it was dealing with the immediate symptoms, the physical, but it was when the mental symptoms then came in. I was already quite a shy and anxious child anyway, not particularly outgoing. Just kind of followed whatever everyone else was doing. And then, it got to a point where I was anxious over just leaving the house. Get very upset, very anxious. That just sort of continued through my teenage years. I wouldn't say it improved. It just continued and just stayed with me.
Yeah. Wow, that must have been really difficult. And with the initial diagnosis, the doctors then, when you said about them saying you needed to act very quickly, they must most concerned about your weight loss and your the malnutrition side of things. Was that their major concern originally?
Yeah, so their concern was being the slender person I naturally am. Don't necessarily have a lot of weight.
Extra,
So at that age, it's like obviously your calorie intake is much less. So what you take in goes straight. It's what kind of builds you up and kind of allows you to grow. That was completely stopped.
Yeah.
They called it stunted growth at the time, I believe. Which basically just meant I didn't have enough to do anything. So everything just stopped.
Yeah.
In terms of malnutrition, I remember, them saying it was about 2 weeks I had left before effectively I starved to death effectively because it was just that bad.
Wow.
But as I said, being that age, I wasn't aware.
Sure.
Personally, I wasn't aware that it was that bad.
Yeah.
But I remember that being said.
Yeah. Just know that something's not right.
Yeah.
But don't take it all in at that age the same. And how about then, the mental health challenges that you talked about that started to become really prevalent in your life? How did they impact you? You said, you talked about not wanting to leave the house and those things, they have a huge impact on our life. How did that overall picture of your sort of mental and physical challenges begin to kind of impact your life?
Yeah, so I would say for me, the mental health side of things, I didn't really realise, again, that was happening until I was becoming more aware of it. So probably when I was 15, 16 maybe, so a couple of years later, I sort of realised how much I was struggling and I could start to kind of perhaps make sense of it a little bit more. effectively, most of it was just pure anxiety. Looking back, although this was never officially diagnosed, probably depression as well, because I was not a happy teenager at all. I know some teenagers generally aren't very particularly as happy, because you're going through things, you're growing up, as you do when you're a teenager, trying to work things out, trying to make sense of things. But when you're struggling with sort of a mental health side of things as well, and you're not necessarily aware that that's what it is, makes it, I think, a lot harder to be able to kind of just decide what you want to be doing, which, as you're starting to think about leaving high school, you've got your exams coming up, a lot of stress with that. I just didn't really have an idea about where I was going, what I was doing, let alone what sort of God perhaps had planned for me, because I couldn't really even make sense of that, because I'm still trying to make sense of just all the symptoms. And although physically by that time I'm kind of doing much better, I'm still struggling with certain aspects, still getting used to how to manage things.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And you talked about, coming to have a relationship with God at quite a young age, to the, as we all do, to our understanding level at the time. And as you're kind of then growing up through your teenage years, facing those challenges, how did that translate with your relationship with God?
I think it was probably, so I remember my parents were always actively praying. I remember at the time the congregation we were with were actively coming around every so often, just praying with my family, my parents, just try, and I think that prayer, looking back, probably did have an effect on me, because I started to pick up things, started to try and sort of be more aware of God and try and see how perhaps he would fit in. And I think that over time it just sort of, I became more active in praying, even though I didn't necessarily know if I was praying things the right way, or it more just felt like quite small conversations. But my parents encouraged me to do it. I think I do remember a breakthrough moment, though, was when my parents encouraged me to be praying more directly and using the name perhaps of Jesus a bit more in my prayers over things that perhaps I sort of wish to have, or even if it was just trying to have a conversation. And over time just sort of built up confidence with that maybe God was listening, and that was kind of my breakthrough moment. I think that's when sort of the journey sort of started more. I started to just feel a bit more in touch with God, could start to sort of ask more questions as well, which very blessed to have parents that were very sort of theological, very good with the Bible, and just sort of being able to sort of bounce off them a little bit, some ideas and thoughts, and them quite happy to share things and go through things and talk about things. Yeah. And I think ultimately that is what helped me sort of connect with God. And in terms of the mental health side of things, one thing my mum, who's a very positive person, anyone who's met her will know, I remember her one day saying, why don't you try and sort of think of more positive things and sort of build on that and maybe add those to your prayers. And so I came up with an idea one day so I had a big board in my bedroom, and I remember just writing on one piece of paper sort of maybe 10 positive things, and on another piece of paper pinning up just the words "be positive." So every time I wake up in the morning, I would look at that board, I would see that, and it would just help me just get a bit more focus, and just allow me to have a bit more of an idea of when I start the day, how I could perhaps start building on those positive thoughts and things.
Yeah, amazing. So as your journey sort of progresses through your teenage years and journey moves on, what's changed in your life? What are maybe some of the things that have improved in your health? I know that some things in your life have changed because you mentioned you got married. I was privileged to be at your wedding a couple of years ago, and you're working. So what are some of the things that have changed in your life and your health over the last years?
Yeah, so I think coming out of my teenage years, I think the first thing I would say would be that I think the way I started connecting God and started to pray more, I started to feel more of His presence sort of involved in my life. And although a lot of issues weren't resolved at that point, I still had a lot of questions about those issues as well. Why did that happen to me? Why am I in the position where I didn't feel I had sort of a future still? I had a job at this stage, so I was working at Centre Parks in Ilfordin, which that definitely helped build my confidence a bit because it was involved a lot more talking to people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I still had a lot of questions over where was my direction.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, yes, I've got a job, great, first step in life, but where am I going here? Because I'm still dealing with symptoms. I'm still not sure how God is going to use this or anything really, and just feeling quite lost still. And I think continue to feel that way, and life continued to feel that way until I ended up in hospital, which I believe must have been maybe 2017. Don't remember the exact year. It was around that period of time. I started to have reoccurring symptoms of the Crohn's disease. Ended up back in hospital. I remember it was a routine blood test that brought me back into hospital. So I was having, I think, once a yearly blood tests, and this particular one, I had an appointment in a week's time with my doctor at the hospital, so I had a routine blood test leading up to that, and I remember having a call a couple of days after from one of the nurses, and they're saying, he wants to see you tomorrow. It's like, okay, great, I get to go for an earlier appointment, fantastic. So my mum takes me up there, happens to be on a day off, and we only sat down for a couple of minutes, and he said, you're about to run into trouble. I remember him saying that, and kind of heart's racing a little bit more, like, okay, what's going on? And the doctor said, so it looks like you are having a flare up, but our major concern is there's a particular test we do in the bloods to look out for particular things, particular organs, make sure everything's working okay. And we found one that your liver is starting to show problems. Right. I remember him saying, you're about to run into trouble, so we need to get you admitted now. So got admitted. And for the first time, I felt completely at peace. And I can't explain it any other way. No. I just remember lying down the bed in A&E. Mum was sat with me, and I just felt completely at ease, just calm. And my mum was asking questions like, "Oh, do you need this? Do I need to get that?" And I just said, "It's all fine. It'll all be okay." And and I ended up spending, I think it was nearly 2 weeks in hospital getting treatment. Treating the symptoms. We didn't hear any more about sort of the liver side of things. That was kind of put to one side. They wanted to do some more tests. And I remember just in the hospital, various experiences in the hospital, which I won't go into now because I could be spending quite some time
Sure.
talking about those. But it just been completely at ease every day. I remember talking to nurses, talking to just people who were in there. There's only a couple of people on my ward at the time, and just being happily just getting on with whatever treatments they were doing. Obviously got back home, got on some new medication. They were treating, trying to find out what's going to work best. Everything seemed to be much better. Had a couple of new symptoms, but nothing that particularly sort of massively affecting life. And just continually just left with this complete ease at everything. I just didn't have any worries, any concerns. And I just think that it was just God just saying, I think you're kind of at the point where you're ready. What that meant, I have no idea. I personally have never felt God speak to me, but I felt that He acts more in my life, and for some reason He just decided then was the time to act, and He acted just with continual peace, which has just remained since, no matter what's happened. We ended up with COVID. Ended up spending time with a lovely lady who met in the congregation when we had meetings on the field with the bubbles and everything. Everyone remembers the fun of COVID.
Right.
So a relationship progressed from that meeting with her. Then the year of COVID was a stressful year for everyone. At the time, I had changed back into it. That was a different job. So I'd spent nearly 4 years as a teaching assistant by that time in a primary school. Any teachers know, tough job. COVID, much tougher still.
Sure.
And by the end of that year, I had reoccurring symptoms again. But again, I still was at peace, still at peace. And I remember, praying, asking about God. Definitely had doubts. I think when you're going through pain, no matter what it is, you're going to have doubts. And I did have doubts, but every time I had doubts, I prayed about it, and I just felt that they were just dealt with. It was just put to one side. It was moved on, just completely gone. I think that's important. It's important to share things with God, because God ultimately is going to do what He's going to do, and He'll take whatever it is you're dealing with. And then the Bible teaches us about laying your burdens at the cross. Jesus' weight is far lighter than our own, and definitely can say that's happened on several occasions and still does. So during that second period in hospital, it was another flare up. It was a lot harder to deal with. There was a lot more pain involved. There's a lot more emotions involved, especially having a girlfriend as well at that time. And it ended up being 3 trips to A&E. One, I stayed nearly a week in hospital, but had to come back because the treatment failed. And when I was back in, they're starting treatment again, hoping that would deal with it. Um, I remember the doctors and nurses always saying they're like, you're our happiest patient. I don't know how you're happy. But you're just always smiling, you're always happy, you're always going around. I remember the nurses jokingly said one time, like, we could give you a nursing scrub, and you could just go around the ward if you want, because you just don't sit down, you're just constantly moving. I just felt no matter what I was going through, I just seemed to see everyone else that was struggling at the time and just wanted to help them. I can't tell you why. Only that it would have been just the Holy Spirit just working. And often for me, I find when the Holy Spirit's working, because you just feel convicted to do things you wouldn't normally do, and you just get on and do them, and you kind of don't worry about yourself. Your worries, anything you were feeling, just kind of gets put to one side, even the pain. So they ended up doing more tests while I was in there. Tests that apparently they should have done over the last couple of years. One of the most important ones was a biopsy of my liver. So when I was eventually well enough to leave the hospital, still in a lot of pain, still struggling with symptoms, but I was on the mend. I think I remember probably about maybe 5 or 6 weeks later, after I was at home, I remember I was at my mum and dad's house, and I had a phone call from another doctor who I didn't recognise. He introduced himself, and he said, your liver biopsy came back. He said, but I wanted to check how you're doing first. Like, how are you feeling? I said, doing okay. I'm on the mend. Still recovering, still taking time off work. Should probably say each one of these trips in hospital I was taking, so over those 2 flare-ups, probably taking a good up to 6 months off work. Taking that long to build up your energy levels and confidence again, which is fine. And so he came back. So talked to the liver doctor. I call him liver doctor, and he just said, so we've got a diagnosis for you. So okay. So what is it? He said, you've got a rare liver disease. Said it's sometimes people with Crohn's get them. Sometimes they get other things. So they put me on like every 6 months screening now for various things to keep an eye on things. The liver disease, so I remember having doubts again. I remember praying. I remember talking to God about, okay, so why am I dealing with one more thing? I've got enough I'm dealing with. Why am I having to have this problem? Why does it have to be this particular one? What am I going to do now? I remember just being kind of convicted, and again, just feeling the Holy Spirit just come upon me and just kind of say, you kind of don't need to worry about it, do you? So I'll deal with it. You just do what you need to do. And again, just felt completely at peace again. I think for me, it just shows how effective conversation with God is. Mm-hmm. And when he's ready to move, it doesn't matter what you're going through, what you're suffering with. I would say pain is personal. It is personal. What you're going through doesn't matter if someone else is going through it either. Ultimately, you're the one who's dealing with it. Yeah. And no one else is really going to understand what you're going through. Yeah. But we serve a suffering God which fully knows what you're going through, is fully aware of your trauma, your emotions. And because of that, you can have peace. And I can testify that peace is true. and God wants you to have it. And when you have it, I would say it's easy to start doubting again. It's easy to, and it's human. I would say it's even normal. But if you give your doubts to God, he'll take them without question. He'll mold your life. He'll do something better with it. Yeah, and he still is.
Yeah, that's really profound and like moving encouragement for me, and I think for anyone who listens to you share. One of the things that I've been thinking about as you've been talking is, and you alluded to it before, you're someone who's experienced pain, suffering through a long season.
Yeah.
And that throws up questions. I think anyone who's experiencing that through long term, whether it's a mental health thing, a physical health thing, bereavement, loss, so many things cause people to suffer. You've had it in sort of multiple angles. How have you wrestled with God through that? And what have you kind of learned through that process?
Yeah, I think wrestle's a fair fair description. I think the way I think of it is, nowhere in the Bible does God promise you're not going to have suffering. In fact, he promises the opposite. He promises you're going to have suffering. It's part of being in a broken world. We deal with multiple issues for everyone. Everyone's going to have suffering of some description at some point. What I would say is ultimately, there's always going to be a process for everyone. I would encourage anyone that God's got to be included in that process. It doesn't mean he's not going to work through medical specialists. It doesn't mean he's not going to one day perform a miracle, because we serve a God of miracles as well. One of the questions I wrestled with is, you see people who have miracles, who have breakthroughs, and you want that.
Yeah.
And several times I would say I've definitely wanted that. Definitely wanted that. Feeling lost in life, I think when you go through something, whether it's at a young age, whatever age you're at, you're going to have those questions of, but why does it happen now? Why do I have to deal with this now? It doesn't really seem fair.
Yeah.
Why am I serving a God who seems to allow suffering? Which I think is a common question for anyone, whether they're a believer or not. And I would encourage that the Bible teaches that God isn't really, he's allowing the suffering, but he's not giving the suffering. The Bible encourages us that God, he works through that suffering ultimately to benefit you. It's just you have to trust him to do it. And as people, we want to be in control of that. I know I would have loved to be in control of it. But because I didn't have control, how my life looks now, although arguably not perfect, to me it's pretty darn perfect. Because I wouldn't have imagined being married. I wouldn't have imagined having a family that stuck together despite the pressures of me being unwell upon them. Just seeing God's grace and seeing miracle after miracle, even if it's not a health miracle.
Yeah.
Most of my miracles God's given me has been all about timings on things. Time and time again, if I am suffering through something, even if it's been for a year or two, or there hasn't been a direct answer, or I've found that those moments when I could be on my knees, those are the moments where he decides that that's the time for something to happen, even if it's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
The way he does it ultimately benefits me and glorifies him. So I can be sitting here, although not perfectly healthy, but in good health even though parts of my body aren't.
Yeah.
Although we're currently always monitoring, I can just be at peace and just know that he's fully aware of what I'm going through. He's gone through it with me, and having given his only son for us, is fully aware of how our pain is affecting us, what we have to endure.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you were going to talk to someone who's maybe in the middle of pain, uncertainty, maybe in the lowest point of your journey, someone who finds themselves right there and who's kind of listened to you, what are one or two things that you'd kind of want to pass on to them?
For me, as I mentioned before, so God in the Bible, he promises suffering. And I asked the question knowing I was coming into this, I did a search to see how many people in the Bible actually suffered. And the answers I got was it's an infinite amount. No one didn't suffer in the Bible. And that you're talking about people who were, close to God, who were fully connected to God, who experienced God in a different way to perhaps we do now, or in particular ways, working how he did then. All of them suffered in some way and continued to suffer. So when you asked me that question, so God promises that we're going to suffer. We're in a broken world. Suffering is part of that world since the time of Adam.
Yeah.
And we entered the broken world that it now is. So he promises that we're going to suffer, but if he keeps that promise, he also keeps his other promises, which a good verse I found very helpful was Deuteronomy 31:8, which is, the Lord himself goes before you and will be with you, and he will never leave you and never forsake you. So do not be afraid and do not be discouraged.
Yeah.
So if he's speaking truth about what we're going to have, he's speaking truth about how we're going to deal with it, and that he's the one who can ultimately deal with it. God fully understands what you're going through, and in those moments where all you're seeing is darkness and questions, and he's fully aware of your pain. Your pain is personal. It's personal to you, and God is fully aware of that, because Jesus was his son, and that's personal to him.
Mm-hmm.
So he's fully aware of your trauma, your pains, your suffering. It might not feel like it in that moment, but if anything, I can testify that God has never failed me. Not once. He hasn't done what I wanted him to do, but he's not failed.
Yeah.
And he promises he won't fail. He can't fail. If he promises something, he keeps it. So my encouragement would be just, even if you have to just cry in God's presence, just keep praying to him, just keep being honest with him, and he will work it out. He will help you. It doesn't feel like it in that moment, and there'll be times where you will doubt, and that's okay. But just continue to try and lean into him, and continue to just keep walking those steps. Having a good family around you will help you. Church family, C3 Church family is a great family. The church anywhere in the world, there'll be a great family to encourage you. Having people around you will help. The story of Job is kind of testament to that as well. Mm-hmm. He's suffered a lot, he lost a lot, and his friends, his family will tell him to give up, but ultimately, even when that was happening for him, God kept his promise and restored everything to him. So even if you're in a situation where it doesn't feel like God's going to do anything, in the end, he will restore it. He will restore it. He hasn't failed. He's not failing today. He wasn't failing yesterday. He's still not failing now. The pain you're going through, he will endure it with you. When I was in the hospital, it always felt like there was a presence with me, keeping me at peace. I never felt I was actually alone. And I would encourage people who are going through bad times, God, if you continue to pray, even if you don't know what to say, even if the pain is so great that you can't even think straight, God, he's suffering with you. He is beside you. He's not left you. He's not forsaken you.
Yeah, thank you, Nathan. It's just been so profound and like really anointed just to hear you share. And I'm really pleased that, you know, when kind of God stirred that in your heart and we spoke about it a year or so ago, that you've been able to share that. And I'm sure it's going to really, you know, be a big blessing, you know, to people who listen to it. Is there any one thing that you haven't said as part of your story that you would have liked to have added in?
I guess just thank you to. I just take the opportunity to say some thank yous. Just thank you to my family. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to actually to speak, trusting me to do that. Thank you definitely to my wife who endures a lot of my quirks every day. But she's incredibly loving and she's incredibly supportive. Thank you thank you to God for just continuing to steer my life. Even it's not a direction I planned it to go in.
Yeah.
I don't think when it comes to pain anyone plans to have that.
Yeah.
Having the opportunity where he can do things that perhaps there wasn't the opportunity to do before, I'm incredibly grateful for. So it's just thank you to him as well, just continuing to be a part of my life and Jesus kind of suffering with us and just guiding us in that direction.
Great. Amen.
Amen.
Love that.